Hi students, very good evening. And actually, I could not post you the yesterday's lecture due to network issues, and I have posted it today evening only. I hope you will go through it. And to record the class also, my network was very slow today, so I could not do it on time. Anyhow, I'll be posting tonight if possible. And as we have finished the unit 2 yesterday, it is the time that we are going to start the unit 3. As actually, the poem prescribed for your study, as you know, is the Paradise Lost, book 1, by the great epic poet of English, that is John Milton. Okay. Now, before we go into the poem, actually, I wish to introduce you to one another important age of English literature, that is Puritan age. So let us see what is Puritan age and what are the characteristics of literature that is produced in this age and all. So let me share my screen now. Yeah, I hope you could see my screen. Uh, and this is the Puritan age. Usually, the timeline is mentioned by uh, many books of history of English literature as 1620 to 1660. Anyhow, I have already told you that um, regarding the timeline, it is only for the facility of our facility that we do divide the literature into different ages so that we can observe the common features or themes, etc. And this is not the final, what you call as the final, this is not the final timeline, or it may vary in some other books. As I have mentioned, many books of history of English literature like Ludwig Examian, Oxford, and then a little brief history is Hudson's or Cambridge, okay, and also of course Indian edition of R.D. Trivedi and many other and Routledge, okay, of late. So we have so many, and we are doing it only to know different features and only for our facility. The literature of 17th century. So we can see the literature of 17th century can be divided into two periods here. Of course, you can see this in my screen. So this is actually called as the Puritan age or the age of Milton. Milton, who was the significant or the very great poet of English literature. And this is further divided into, this age is further divided into two periods. One is Jacobean and the Caroline period. This is due to the name of the kings who ruled during the times, James I. So literature that is produced during James I period is called as Jacobean, and literature that is produced during Charles I is called as Caroline period, literature. So this James I period is from 1603 to 1625, and then Caroline period is 1625 to 1649. Okay. And this Caroline period again actually is also called as this the 17th century, okay, literature we are talking about. So the 17th century literature is divided into two periods. One is the Puritan age and the other is the Restoration age. We will come to the Restoration age later. Now we will see the Puritan age, which is of course again subdivided into two periods of Jacobean and Caroline periods. And the Puritan age, actually, if you go into how and how it started, etc., we will look into those factors. it is marked by, this age is especially marked by the decline of Renaissance age, which is the age of revival of knowledge. So we have seen how Renaissance, the age of Renaissance, is called as the rebirth in all aspects, cultural or historical or scientific or in literature also we have seen the rebirth. So the Renaissance, of course, is very rich. The literature of Renaissance is very rich, and new avenues were explored during this age, and all we have known. But when we come to Puritan age, this spirit of what you say invention and the spirit of reviving the knowledge, etc., of course we can see that it has declined to some extent. Now coming to the meaning of Puritanism, see, Puritanism can be a short answer question also for you. So what is the Puritanism? This meaning of Puritanism is, in the 16th and 17th centuries, Protestants advocated a strict religious discipline along with simplification, called as a Puritanism. So, Puritanism is, in other words, to give you the to give you as the name reveals, is to purify. See, in Chaucer's poem, we have seen how the Roman Catholic Church was very corruptive, and all corrupt practices were being, carried on in the churches, and people who are the fathers or friars, all those who are dedicated to the service of Lord were leading a kind of luxurious life, and to some extent they were also a kind of bohemian lives also they were leading, and we could see some corrupt practices of papal indulgence and all those things. So, and how bribing was taken from the believers, okay, or church members, so that they will be relieved of the what you say, the sin that they have did actually, and how they were biased towards male, female, also we have seen. So such was the corruptive scenario of the church. However, though not for the corruptive reasons, that the Roman Catholic Church was not dissolved, but the head leadership, or what you call, the church actually was a separate institution, and this was, as you all know, the papal authority. Pope was the religious head of the state, and of course they have a what you call, they have a great influence over the king in taking all the crucial decisions and in ruling the kingdom. So, but when I told you about Reformation before, Renaissance, so how Henry VIII, who was ruling England, say during actually he ruled England from 1509 to 1547, and he was actually very eager to have a male heir for his dynasty, but he wanted to marry one more time, and but Pope Clement did not agree to annul this marriage. So Henry VIII became very, of course, angry, and he declared himself as the head of the church or religion also. The church, of course, the papal authority was removed, and the king became actually the head of the church also. So after this, the authority of Pope was removed, the Roman Catholic Church was losing its importance, because that was not being patronized by the rulers, the kings, and they have started their own church, which is called as the Anglican Church, and later it becomes the Protestant Church. So this Protestant actually started from Henry VIII, and slowly they started gaining importance. And the Roman Catholic Catholicism, which was severely criticized by Edmund Spencer, also, as we could see in his Fairy Queen, which is not described for your study. But Fairy Queen, of course, is an allegory. That is during the reign of Queen Elizabeth. But after Henry VIII, after the Reformation, we could see, if we go to the history of England, we could see that Edward VII ruled England, and of course he continued Henry VIII's Reformation in religion. But after him, we have Mary I. So, who is called as Bloody Mary, because she was very much intended that England should become Catholic once again. Actually, she's not like her father. Okay, so there we could see again there were brutal killings of Protestants, encouraging of Catholics, etc. So this kind of religious strife was going on, and when Elizabeth came, actually, let us first see what happened when Elizabeth came, and what is the relation between Queen Elizabeth and the development of Puritanism, and how Puritans were gaining voice, or trying to establish the Puritan spirit in a great manner, etc. So Queen Elizabeth, as I have already told you, has ruled England, that is from 1558 to 1603. And this is actually Elizabethan age, which is also a very significant age of literature in the history of England. So when Elizabeth came, actually ascended the throne, the Elizabethan church settlement had been a cautious compromise in which Calvinist and Catholic elements were blended. So Queen Elizabeth was very careful, and she wanted to have a peaceful kingdom. And in order to remove, or in order to control this religious strife, which was there before her, like Mary I, Bloody Mary, who was very much intended to convert the whole England into Catholic once again. So, in order to pacify the rivalries between these two groups of Catholicism and Protestantism, actually, Mary had brought upon a kind of settlement. This was a compromise, a very cautious, very careful compromise between the Calvinist and Catholic elements. Yesterday only we have seen in Marvel's introduction to Marvel, who is a Calvinist, who is a follower of John Calvin, who was a Protestant believer. So, Queen Elizabeth has taken caution, and made a church settlement, and blended these two beliefs. Some of the Catholic elements and some of the Calvinist elements were taken and blended, mixed. So the Queen had been made the supreme governor of the church. So, as Henry VIII did during the Reformation period, declaring the king as the head of the church also. And of course, Queen Elizabeth also retained the same manner, but she made some effort to blend these two viewpoints of the same religion. So, an act of uniformity had been passed. So, not to give individual, individuality to the churches, they have passed an act, which is called as the Act of Uniformity, wherein they have adopted that a common prayer book was introduced. So, because some of you are Christians, who I don't know whether you are Catholics or Protestants. In the old Protestant churches like Lutheran or Baptist, etc., you will have a common prayer book. Or even in the Catholic church also, you will have common japas where they will keep on reciting. They may not give any book to the believers, but when the father is reciting, the believers will learn it, and they have some kinds of recitations where the father says one thing and then the believer has to say the same thing, or which is like an answer also sometimes, which is different. So in the Protestant churches also, there is the practice of maintaining a common prayer book. This was actually introduced with the Act of Uniformity. And then there were 39 articles which were drawn up. And all clergy is priests, have to accept. So 39, they are like the guiding principles. Okay, like our constitution has articles, and this Act of Uniformity has 39 articles which should be accepted by all priests or clergy, whether they are the followers of Calvinist or the Catholic. They have to accept and abide by them. And the 39 articles were so framed as to enable members of the Church of England to believe in either predestination, which is a doctrine of John Calvin, and or free will, which is a Catholic doctrine, as they thought fit. So here, though they have to follow these 39 articles, a kind of autonomy was given, either to follow Calvinist belief or Catholic belief. That is left to the believers and, of course, the clergy. So this is like unifying the religion, officially done. So Elizabeth wanted to unify so that she can reduce the rivalries. And of course, there used to be much rivalry. Okay, Catholics being persecuted during the Protestant regime, or Protestants being persecuted during the Catholic regime, like Bloody Mary, who is very notorious to kill many Protestants, etc. And those, the children of these clergy were also not encouraged. So, in order to remove all these differences, and in order to bring some kind of peace between these two major religious groups, Queen Elizabeth has brought in this Act of Uniformity. So whatever is the act, and whatever are the efforts of Queen Elizabeth, in spite of the settlement that they have brought in, the Calvinistic system, which is a form of Puritanism. So I told you that John Calvin is a Protestant. Of course, they are into Puritanism. Actually, the name Puritanism could have been originated because of the corruptive practices of the Roman Catholic Church. So, dividing from the Roman Catholic Church, they felt that they were purer than the Catholics. So, John Calvin actually established a form of Puritanism, and in spite of the unifying, efforts of unification, the doctrines of Calvin penetrated more into the minds of the great majority of English Protestants. So that is how, at the beginning of the 17th century, that means in 1600s onwards, there was no such thing as a Puritan party. That is the National Church of Scotland, or disciplinarians who had felt the influence of Calvin of Geneva. So, at the beginning of the 17th century, that means after 4 or 5 decades of the Unification Act, you may not find any influence of this Puritan. Just a minute. Yeah, there was no. Okay. My screen has gone too much of this thing. Yeah. Now, of course, it is visible now. Oh, so there were not many Puritan. Yes, not many Puritans were there. Yet it was gaining ground slowly due to the works of John Calvin, and later we have Thomas Cartwright. He was also a Presbyterian leader, and he felt that the Anglican Church did not at all accord with the principles of the primitive Christian Church. Actually, with the Reformation, the Catholic Church was, is divided into the Anglican Church and Catholic Church. But in the Anglican Church, we have John Calvin's group and other groups also. And while this Protestantism was growing through in the form of Anglican Church, some of the Presbyterian leaders, they felt that even this Anglican Church is not following the principles of primitive Christian Church, and they urged that bishops should be deprived of their disciplinary powers and stick to preaching. So they felt that bishops should not be given any power of disciplinary powers like judges. Actually, um, in those days, bishops or fathers used to finalize the cases, hearings. They used to sit for the hearings in the sessions. Actually, the word sessions that we have seen in Shakespeare's sonnet. Okay, to the whenever I sit to the sessions of silent thought, in that the sessions is a very legal word where actually we could see only church bishops used to take up these sessions. So the Thomas Cartwright, who was a Presbyterian and also a Puritan in spirit, he felt that all bishops should not have these powers. And another, thinker, another Puritan thinker is also there, who is Thomas Brown, and he also felt that the independence, the father of independence, maintained that the civil magistrate should have no powers. So Thomas Brown, another leader, they felt, and two other Puritan thinkers, Greenwood and Barrow, they advocated independent and self-growing churches. So see how after Reformation and then after the Act of Unification, all these thinkers have developed, and slowly a kind of Puritan sect started developing, and in the thinking of Greenwood, okay, or Thomas Cartwright, and then we have Baptists and Anabaptists also. So all these Puritan sects were gaining ground and threatened the whole Elizabethan church settlement. So, in spite of all the unification efforts and all these Puritan sects, which came into existence, of course, they threatened the church settlement, and then in 1583, because of this situation, Queen Elizabeth, in 1583, took this issue very seriously, and then she appointed John Whitgift, the Archbishops of Canterbury, to check the spread of hateful doctrines by a strict censorship of the press. However, whatever it is, the Puritanism, of course, was growing, and many Puritans, because of the trial that they may receive, have started going to America. So many Puritans, their American Puritanism is another kind, where they have actually exiled in exile, or they have run away from England in order to avoid the persecutions of Queen Elizabeth, and then they went and settled in America. And there it is another story. American literature, how American Puritanism was influential, and how it influenced the literature of America, etc. That's a different story. You will be learning perhaps in your second year. So this is the background of the development of the Puritan sect, and also how in the Puritans have slowly gained ground and were establishing what you call as the Puritanism as a school, okay, or they made Puritanism very widespread also, okay. And so by the time 1620, that is 17th century, and the 17th century to the first decades itself, or to second or third decade itself, Puritanism has gained a solid ground, and they started developing this ism in a way. So this is actually these are a group of people who believed that there was a need to purify the Church of England. So this purification process, the process of purification was based upon a kind of the doctrines of the English school of English Protestants of course 16th and 17th centuries, which developed gradually, okay. And one who believe and one who follows or lives in accordance with the Protestant precepts of Puritanism is called as a Puritan. And of course we can see John Milton is one of the chief advocates of the Puritans, whereas Andrew Marvell, who was a contemporary of John Milton, was never a Puritan completely. And moreover, he was dividing his mind to support royalty, that is monarchy, and afterwards Cromwell. Even Milton also supported Cromwell. He stood for the liberty, etc. This is all due to the Puritan spirit only. So this is how the background of the Church of England and how Puritanism came into existence, and what are the salient features of the Puritan age, or what these Puritans intended. The writers of Puritan age followed the paths of the great Renaissance writers. These Puritan age writers, of course, followed the great Renaissance writers only, unlike the metaphysical poets. The spirit of science popularized by great men like Newton, Bacon, and Descartes was, of course, there in the Puritan era. In literature, this spirit infuses itself in the form of criticism, okay, which was truly the creation of Puritan age. Puritans have questioned many of the practices of the Church of England, and that is why they wanted to separate and develop a kind of group. And in literature, the spirit infuses itself in the form of criticism, which was truly the creation of Puritan age. In this period, people took stock of what had been acquired. So whatever was acquired, they started a questioning spirit also. People classified, analyzed, and systematized many things which were having no importance before that, okay. Before that, and English language was started being used as a medium for instruction during this Puritan age. And another thing is the art of biography was popularized, okay. It is not known in the previous ages. And satire and irony got fame in Puritan age, individually as well as on collective basis also. Readers had become criticizers, okay. Readership was encouraged, and they also used to read, criticize, and analyze and judge also. John Milton was the best representative of Puritanism, as I have already told you. Puritanism is also considered as the second greatest Renaissance in a way, okay. Why? Because this is the rebirth of the moral nature of man. which followed intellectual awakening of Europe in 15th and 16th century. See, in 15th and 16th century, it is an intellectual awakening, but here it is the moral awakening. So it is a rebirth, a renaissance of morality. Puritanism is, of course, that only. Okay, Puritanism. And of course, despotism was the order of the day, and uh, Puritan movement stood for the liberty of people of Europe. Of course, after despotism, we could see Cromwell becoming the parliamentarian, and Puritans have supported because they also liked the spirit of liberty. And there was an introduction of morality and high ideals in politics also, because Cromwell also stood for liberty, equality, etc. And this age, if we could see, had two perspectives, that is personal righteousness, civil and religious liberty. So in this age, there was more emphasis on the personal righteousness and then civil and religious liberty. And it aimed at making people free and honest. And in Puritan age, John Milton and Thomas Cromwell fought for the religious liberties of people. So John Milton, of course, became an associate of Thomas Cromwell, who fought for the religious liberties of people. And with the passage of time, Puritanism became the movement against the king. Okay, king is Charles. Okay, King Charles, and of course he was persecuted also. Stood for, and the Puritanism became a kind of uh, religious and political movement, which is was criticizing king and then supporting Thomas Cromwell, who is a parliamentarian. And Puritans was the name given to the people, of course, who advocated the certain changes in the form of the worship of the Reformed English Church under Queen Elizabeth. So we know how Queen Elizabeth has made a unification effort, and how people, of course, in spite of that, Protestantism spread, and among Protestants, a kind of a branch of Puritans have developed, and this has gone. Okay. So, what are the chief literary characteristics of Puritan age? If we see that, actually there was um, confusion. That is two forms of religion, and as I told you yesterday, also wars. Okay. And the confusion in the form of government, monarchy or parliamentary, and then this is either Puritanism or other forms of religion. So these kinds of confusion was there, and uh, and the and also we can find the breaking up of the ideals, like the medieval standards of chivalry, that is knighthood, as knights going on crusades, etc., which we could see in Chaucer, and of course in Spenser also, in Fairy Queen. That was not there during this period. And the impossible loves and romances, which Spenser, of course, talked about, and they are no more the models. And we have this kind of a collapse of the concept of the national church. The idea of national church is also collapsing. So it was a kind of confusion that was prevailing in the age. Hence, the literature also will reflect this kind of confusion. So, in the absence of any fixed standard of literary criticism or literature, we have these metaphysical poets who produced poetry in with the hyperboles, exaggerated statements, etc. And it took, of course, new and startling forms in Donne and Herbert, and also prose became very serious. Okay, in Henry Burton's work of Anatomy of Melancholy. And there is a kind of spiritual gloom which sooner or later fastens upon all the writers of this age. Spiritual gloom. That is why Milton wrote Paradise Lost, and which is unfairly attributed to Puritan influence, is due to the breaking up of accepted standards in government and religion. Actually, this gloom is not due to Puritan, but yet it was, attributed to Puritans only. And the three main characteristics of the Elizabethan literature, with all its diversity, unity, okay, uh, unity in spirit resulting from the patriotism of all classes and their devotion to a queen, that is Queen Elizabeth, with all her faults, and also they sought first the nation's welfare, but under the Stuarts, all this was changed. But after the Queen Elizabeth, this kind of unity has lost, and the king is not anymore adored, and there were enemies for king also. We could see how the people were in demanding for a kind of parliamentarian government. Okay, and the country was, of course, divided by the struggle of political and religious liberty, both in politics and in religion. They start, they were expecting a kind of liberty. And the literature was divided in spirit, as were the struggling parties. So, because literature is the product of the society, the whatever in from whatever society that it is coming out, or social conditions that it is coming out. So during this age, as the confusion was prevailing, and there were no grand models, and there was no spirit of what do you call, nationalism, one nation, etc., one king, one queen, etc. So this, of course, has shaken, and there was a kind of confusion and struggle, which was brought, of course, into the literature of Puritan age also. So Elizabethan literature, yeah, Elizabethan literature actually, generally it was inspiring, and it throbs with youth, hope, and vitality. While Puritan age speaks about sadness, gloom, and pessimism. That is why if you go to Paradise Lost, it is the sin. And then, of course, Milton states that his aim was to justify the ways of God to man. Okay, so he felt that men were not following God, men were all sinful, and they wanted to reform in, instead of celebrating, okay, the vitality, the spirit, the strength, etc. Puritans were always speaking of gloom, pessimism, etc. And of course, during the development of poetry, of course, was there during the age of Milton, and also the metaphysical poetry, wherein, of course, there also you could see the dilemma between spiritual love, worldly love, etc. We have seen, and so, unlike the poetry of the Elizabethan age, or the poetry of metaphysicals, okay, in the Puritan age, we could see a kind of somber mood in literature, which is thinking most, which is thinking more of the sadness, the pessimism, the confusion, or confusing situations that were, prevailing during this period of the 17th century. So the literature of the Puritan age, of course, is a mirror of the chaotic situations that were prevailing during this period, and of course, it reflects their what you call intention of purifying it also. Okay, so this is briefly what I have to share regarding the background of this Puritan age, and then tomorrow's class I will continue this with a few introductory lines to John Milton, and then I will go to the text Paradise Lost. Okay. Have a nice time. I hope you will listen to it. And if you have any doubts, I have been telling you to interact, but none of you are coming forward. Anyhow, I hope you will be listening and then try to take some kind of notes also. Write down some important points because you may get a question like what are the characteristics of Puritan poetry or literature in general, and also what is Puritanism, and what was the influence of Puritanism on the literature of the age, that is Puritan age, etc. Okay, and of course, John Milton as a poet, a Puritan poet, is also a very significant question. Okay, have a nice time. Bye.